in many of your texts you mention aboutness thinking and withness thinking. Could we use this idea within leadership and organization?
Well, I would have thought so. I was going back to my days in child development work yesterday, and I was just showing a little video of, I think it was only about a 2-month-old child. And the mother's in front of the child, and she puts her face a little bit too close to the child. The child feels overwhelmed and turns away. And then does a little, some grasping his hands and begins to feel at peace with himself and turns to the mother again, wanting contact. But then she's still too close, so he turns away. And gradually, here's the crazy thing, you can say, the child, the baby is teaching a woman to be a mother.
Yeah. So she learned from the baby. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this idea that the leader is the one who really knows what to do. It is a stupid, as Jakob and I would call it, it's this heroic leadership.
Yeah.
It's crazy. There's a nice article that Anne Cunliffe did with somebody who was working with all the leaders of the security services at the airports when they had to, American airports, when they had to implement all of these new procedures. And one of those guys came up with a nice phrase. He said, "We've had to become creatures of our environment."
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
We've had to really get a sense. We don't know what to do. The frontline workers on those on all of those metal detectors, and they're the ones who can keep telling us what they need to do a better job.
Yeah. So you are actually advocating for a more dialogical approach, including the many voices of the organization in one another way.
There's each one of those voices has something. They occupy a particular place in the world that absolutely nobody else occupies.
Yeah.
From where they, I don't like the notion of positioning, because a lot of us don't just sit and go nowhere. A lot of us are walking around in a particular region of the world, looking at it this way, that way, and so forth, and having a particular task or interest in that particular region of the world. But nonetheless, they're coming to an understanding of that particular region of the world that nobody else possesses. And it's a sheer waste of resources not to find some way of letting them have a say in the better running of the whole organisation. I was, I'm a good old-fashioned socialist, and I never thought that I would ever get drawn into working in business organisations, which always seem to me to be screwing over the ordinary people for the maximum amount of profit. But anyway, I got drawn for a while working into a very well-known oil company, and came across some executives there that I thought were pretty admirable. And one of them, we were talking about innovation, and she said, "Oh, I just hate that word innovation. It's far too abstract, far too up in the air. I just continually think, what would be good about for the company in the future?
Yeah.
Where are we now?
Yeah.
Where have we got to go?
Yeah.
In fact, as you know, I'm not a great fan of theories. I'm not a great fan of models. I'm not even a great fan of concepts. And I really want to make this distinction, a very important distinction, between what I would call planning and preparation. You heard Sheila use that word. The phrase I actually used was poised resourcefulness.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah.
Of how can you get yourself on the edge of where the next step is going to have to happen, where you don't exactly quite know what that next step's going to be, but you've accumulated an enormous number of resources. And using the example of the tennis player, tennis players do a lot of on-court practice, but they also do a lot of off-court practice. They're looking at videotapes of other tennis players, how do the other guys do it, and so forth. So going back to that executive and her concern with what's going to be good for the company in the future, she was able to do what I call quite a lot of imaginative work.
Yeah.
You're not just dealing with the crisis management, the problem in hand. In fact, I don't think of leadership as anything to do with problem solving. It's getting an orientation. Who are we? Where are we? Where are we? Does that go again? Picture. Who
Yes.
are we? What on earth's going to happen to us in the future?
Yeah. But do you think this process should be done alone by the leader, him or herself, or should it be done collaboratively in a dialogical process, or how can it be done?
Well, I think one of the worst things that can happen is when people gather like a king gathering their courtiers around them, and the courtiers are the gateway to the king. So if anybody wants to say anything to the king, they have to approach the courtiers, and the courtiers then say, oh, so-and-so wouldn't like to hear that. And quite often, what might seem to be a set of useful collaborators are insulating the person from, well, in fact, Hersted today talked of Hannah Arendt's notion of sovereignty. Yeah. That sovereignty leaves you in peace. Whereas you need a set of collaborators around you. Somebody from finance, somebody from materials, somebody from research and development, somebody from customer services and whatnot, who's really going to continually disturb you interrupt you and disturb you about, well, there's something developing here which we've not really had in the past. These other companies are doing things in such a different way that all of our customers are taking this much easier track to getting our products or whatever.
Yeah. Would you mind if we talk a little bit more about communication in leadership?
Sure. Yeah.
Because we are approaching this theme, I think, in a way. I remember once I read that there was a chapter you wrote together with Anne Conliffe about the leader as author. Yeah. Do you remember that? It was in 2003.
Absolutely. And it came from a marvellous book, Images of Organisation of Gareth Morgan. Yeah. And absolutely this whole business of, let me just take a little jump. If you're trying to be scientific, you come up with ideals and you think reality is something that's got to correspond with those ideals, be identical to. And we're not very good at working with just similarities and different. Every metaphor we come up with is never quite it.
Yeah.
Wittgenstein says about language, well, it's like a city, but it's not. It's like a game, but it's not, and so forth. None of our metaphors are exactly it, but they each reveal something as well as conceal something. Anyway, Gareth wrote this Metaphors of Organisation and said the good leader or the good manager has got to be a good reader of the organisation. But I'd also say they've got to be good readers of the context and the situation of the organisation as well. But more than that, going back to that CEO who said, I want to think of what's going to be good for the company in the future. And that's where we produce this image of the leader or manager as being an author, being able to provide a sort of vision where everybody, in fact, there was in one of the interviews Anne did with an executive, he said, well, before each meeting I try and dream up a story where I don't want to criticise everybody, I don't want to tell everybody what to do, I want to try and create a sort of mythic story where everybody can see their place in it. And so the last meeting I was in, I came up with this story about medieval knights and a castle that we had to raid, and a drawbridge and the moat and the kind of getting to get ready for the slinging the fireballs across the area. And he said, yeah, and everybody could see their place in it. But that's a major imaginative task to come up with a vision.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the leader must have some poetic skills or
Precisely.
work with his own imagination, fantasy. Would it be helpful to read books or novels or
it might.
Fairy tales?
Yeah, well, yes, fairy tales. I mean, the old wisdom in the fairy tales, and the dragons and the wizards and so forth. Not perhaps too crazy. I think someone like David Bowie thinks a little bit like that.
Why not? Why don't you agree with his ideas? I thought you were...
No, I'm saying I think David Bowie goes along with a little bit of craziness like that.
Yeah.
Myself,